We're trying to support those people in whom multisensory perception is emerging, and there's a lot of them.
Estévez Show. Good to see you again.
Hello, Peter. It's good to see you again. I so enjoyed our first talk.
Well, thank you for coming back, and we're going to have a juicy one today. It's good to see you, Gary.
Oh, it's good to see you, Peter. How have you been?
I've been really, really good. I've been busy, between my companies that I run in Mexico, which I'm more of a passive. I'm the chairman of the board of an oil and gas company, and I'm the senior advisor to the board and the largest stockholder, but I'm not involved in the day-to-day operations. So, but it does require a lot of my time, even though I'm not involved in the day-to-day operations.
How is that? How is that, Peter?
Well, I still review reports and the growth and numbers my business is in Mexico, so it's a lot of relationship brokering. Okay. And a lot of that requires me making the phone calls, paving the way, calling in the favor, if you know what I'm saying.
Wow.
So, it probably requires a good, 7 to 10 hours a day of my time per week, which is a lot of time, believe it or not, when it's intense. And then I have the podcast, and then I have a couple of other businesses that, that I'm involved in, and my big mission, my movement, what I call the legacy building, which is a commitment that I have through this platform that we are building called Excelente. And as I mentioned to you, is the first ever Latin leadership and personal development platform. I discovered something when I enter the personal development space as a student. Okay. When I started following people like yourself, Gary, people like John Asseroff, people like my good friend Robin Sharma, people like Les Brown and Lisa Nichols and Michael Beckwith, and my introduction to the personal development space was actually during a very difficult time in my life where I lost my mother. My wife asked me for a divorce, and I was facing the economic crisis. We were all facing the economic crisis of 2008. And then soon after my father passed away. So within a 14 to 16 month period, I found myself broken. Okay. And although I have achieved a lot of financial success, I felt that I could not get it together, that there was something lacking. And what I had realized was, Gary, and I don't mean to get in this soap opera, but what I realized very early on was that I had incredible survival skills. I had become very resourceful as a result of where I came from, but I had not adopted a new belief system that was congruent with where I was socially and economically. I had not acquired the emotional intelligence. I had not dumped the baggage. I kept taking the broken little boy into the marriage, into the partnership, into the boardroom, into the friendships, everywhere. I had not shed the old belief system, the limited mindset, okay, the scarcity mindset. I believe that a lot of humans, if not a huge percentage of them, operate from what I call a state of survival. They are time traveling between the past and the future, and they are rarely ever available in the present and in the now. because they cannot afford to be. They're too preoccupied. They have not set a set of values or principles that allow them to see the world with clarity and possibilities. And I was one of those guys. I saw my parents struggle in poverty and everything, and I wanted to run away from poverty and run away from everything that I came from, but I did not run away from the belief system. I still took it. Okay? I still took it with me. Okay. And basically what I had to do, Gary, was to rewire that mindset. So a lot of that mindset is very prevalent in my culture. It's very prevalent in my community. So I'm going to circle back to the point that I was trying to make. When I got involved as a student into the space of personal development, which I still am a student and continue to be for the rest of my life, I realized that I was one of the few people in the rooms that looked like me, that talked like me, that sounded like me, and they came from where I came from. I also realized that there's not very many people on the stage that I could relate to, okay? Or the younger Peter could relate to, right? So I think that there's a disconnect culturally. I think there's in the Latin community, personal development, emotional intelligence has not gone mainstream. Although it is digitized, it is democratized, and it is demonetized and readily available through social media and other means, there's still the lack of connection and the lack of understanding. I often cite the fact that I have seen what has happened in the African American community through platforms like Oprah, who you've been on her, one of the most returning guests there. And also through Tyler Perry, they have created incredible movements and incredible opportunity for the African American community. They have actually brought their deficiencies open into, they have created a movement out of the issues that have prevailed in their communities. And as a result of that, the African American community has advanced incredibly in the last 20 years. And I truly believe that if I am able to make a dent in the Latin market, I can do the same thing for that community.
Yeah. Well, there's so much to talk about, Peter. That's really remarkable, and
I didn't even ask you, Gary, how are you and how are Linda doing?
Oh,
how is life? My apologies.
Oh no, you're excited. I understand what you're saying, and I accept your excitement and your passion and wanting to share that. I do that a lot too. We're fine. We're very busy. We're something like we decided a little while ago that since we're not going to live that much longer compared to so many of the younger people around us, that we wanted to find a way to continue to support people now and after we leave the Earth School who are interested in creating authentic power and spiritual partnerships. So we decided to create our just working title between ourselves was Universal Human Global Ecosystem. And we're not business people, we're not organizers, although Linda really naturally organizes, but we decided to use all of the readily tools available, created a new website, have online self-paced courses under development, have a social media outreach now. We never really had that before. Published a book, Universal Human.
Sure. I read your book, by the way.
Oh, have you? Oh, I'm so glad. Yeah.
Absolutely.
We a community called Soul to Soul, and a podcast which I don't have the bandwidth to do now, but I will do, hopefully this year, by the same name, Universal Human. And all of that has stretched us so much. We need to have more help. We have some really good advisors, and we gave a talk, an interaction at the for the organization Conscious Capitalism, which was co-founded by John Mackey, who created Whole Foods. That's why we went to Austin when you and I last talked.
Okay.
And we didn't connect when
Yeah.
we were in Texas, but we were so full with our activity then. And we met so many people there that were so identified with what we were sharing and what we do share, that we're really want to work with them in the business community. And I feel that what you're describing for the Latin community is all so. I mean, I've seen it myself. I have, I don't know why, but I have such a strong affinity for all things Latino and Latina. Yo no puedo hablar español, pero porque I think español es una lengua bonita. Y yo no sé why quiero. Pero I just, with some of the fellows that I work around, they teach me a little bit of Spanish, and I love it. One of them always said, when I talk about anything that concerns me, he says, yeah, just say es todo.
Es todo.
I've been saying es todo, and everybody who speaks Spanish laughs. I have to find out from you what that means sometime. I think it's all, it's everything.
It's all.
Yeah.
It's all. Yeah.
So I want to support you in what you're doing. There's no question about that. I look at a larger context. I feel, as you know, because you read Universal Human, maybe, and Seed of the Soul is a good one to read too, good book, that in my experience there is an epic, unprecedented transformation to human consciousness that's happening now. It's been happening for about a generation, and within a few, 2 more maybe generations, everyone will have this new consciousness. It's expansion beyond the limitations of the 5 senses. And people begin to have hundreds of millions of people are having multisensory experiences. For example, they ask questions like, am I more than a mind and a personality? Am I more than a body and a mind? This kind of question comes from multisensory perception. Multisensory perceptions are everywhere, and they change our experience of ourselves and the world, the universe, relationship, community, culture, religion, ethnic group, gender, everything. We're moving in that direction. And this new consciousness doesn't have to be earned. It's happening. And it's happening eventually, quickly. When I say quickly, 2 generations, that's a long time, but compared to the 300 million years that humans have been evolving, it's faster than an eye blink. It's faster than a heartbeat. And it's happening now. And I don't know, so we want to support people in this. So there's a couple of ways we want to support them. Number one, let them know that it's good, they're sane, they're healthy, they're not going insane because they're having multisensory perceptions, because they can talk to non-physical guidance, because they're becoming highly intuitive, because they're seeing everything differently. They're waking up as spiritual beings who are longing for harmony and cooperation and sharing and reverence for life in a world of discord and competition and hoarding and exploitation, a world in which life is a cheap commodity. And we want to validate those experiences. You're sane. Right. You're grounded. Another reason is that this new perception, this new consciousness does not make us more constructive, more connected, it does make us more connected. It makes us realize how connected we are, but it doesn't make us kinder. It doesn't make us less brutal. It doesn't make us less self-serving. These are all aspects that everyone has, parts of every personality. And to do that, to move beyond that, requires creating the new understanding of power, which is alignment of the personality with the soul. And it's in dramatic contrast to the old understanding of power, which was ability to manipulate and control. So this has to be created. And the creating it is our evolutionary path now. That's my experience. And to create it, essentially, it's learning how to love, learning how to give the gifts you were born to give. But it requires work. It requires becoming aware, emotionally aware of all of the parts of your personality, frightened and loving. By frightened, I mean the parts that are angry, jealous, resentful, competitive, overwhelmed, superior and entitled, inferior and need to please, that are compulsive, obsessive, that have addictions, and moving beyond the control of them, challenging them when they appear. And the loving parts of our personalities, which we experience as gratitude, appreciation, caring, contentment, patience, awe of the universe, recognizing them and cultivating them. And as we do that, that's creating authentic power.
Wow.
And now, that's easy to understand, but to do it, that takes the work. I mean, anger has been a big part of my life. Sexual addiction was a big part of my life. So just those are enough for illustrative purposes. But for example, when I was angry, when I was in my 20s, 30s, 40s, I knew I was angry. I shared it with everyone. I said, yeah, I'm angry. I've always been angry. I'm always going to be angry. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. But I didn't realize what I was doing to myself. I was pushing people away. They didn't let themselves be vulnerable to me. They didn't want close relationships with me. I was intimidating, and it was isolating. And the more isolated I became, the more angry I became. This is people who don't recognize the frightened parts of their personalities act on them unconsciously, and they create destructive consequences. Creating authentic power is the process of becoming able to distinguish within yourself the difference between love and fear, and choose love no matter what is going on inside of you, like anger, rage, resentment, greed, or what is going on outside of you, like another 9/11 event or a global pandemic. That's the work. That's creating authentic power. That's everything that Linda and I do, the books we write, the events we give, the global ecosystem that we're creating by whatever name we're going to give it. The name isn't important. And we realize, because we're in a legacy building too, but I don't use the term legacy because it reminds me of old, hoary, controlling from the grave kind of energy.
Right.
And I realize that it's not an institute. We have an institute. We have a nonprofit foundation, but those are not going to be the legacy, Peter. The legacy is going to be the experience, the lived experience of creating authentic power in people around the world. Long after we're gone, you and me and Linda, it's that experience that's going to be important to them.
Right.
And that's what we want to create, giving people the opportunity to create those experiences. Spiritual partnerships is a relationship, in my experience, that's replacing all others. Marriage relationships, friendships, commercial relationships, social relationships. It's partnership between equals for the purpose of spiritual growth.
Wow.
Spiritual partners cannot create authentic power for others. And they know others can't create it for them, but they can support one another in doing that. And it's so amazing. So our vision is spiritual partnerships, maybe 6 to 8 people around the world, these circles, overlapping, interacting, of individuals creating authentic power. And we don't have to convince anybody. We don't sell. We don't persuade. We don't proselytize. This is our evolutionary path. We want to contribute as much as we can. We want to give what we've been given to give, and give it in a way that's most relevant and healthy. Whether it's to a Latino growing up in poverty, a German businessman growing up in wealth, a Vietnamese farmer, a Native American. I have strong affiliations with all the Aboriginal cultures. I have strong affiliations with prisoners, with inmates. And I know, because I know enough about life to know that these weren't inclinations, affiliations, passions, and love that spring into being since I was born in Texas and brought up in Kansas. They do not. Those activate experiences that predate my birth. I mean, there's something that draws me to these cultures, and I don't spend a lot of time thinking why. Sometimes I know a little bit. They are. That's the way it is. This is the foundation of multisensory education, the social structure. All the things that, as you've read, all of our social structures are disintegrating now. They're dissolving, and they don't have any salvage value because they can't be fixed. They can't be fixed because they're not broken. They're obsolete, and they're being replaced by new social structures of commerce, education, healthcare, even the military, jurisprudence. And these social structures are growing up now. And even though it looks like the world is collapsing because of the divisions, political divisions, religious divisions, social divisions, wealth divisions, it's not. These are all expressions of what we inherited from the old consciousness, from a five-sensory humanity, from which people of our age emerged. Now there's neonates being born with multisensory perception, and there's hundreds of millions more in whom it's emerging. Like me, I was an officer in the U.S. Army. I was in the Special Forces, and I liked it. And now I dedicate my life to what we're talking about.
Sure.
So when I hear you talking about the Latin community and Excelente, my heart goes right out. I want to say, yeah, bro, I want to help you. But I know there's limited things I can do, but what I can do, I'll do my best to share. And because I feel that we are colleagues. We are looking in the same direction. Our hearts are open in the same ways.
Absolutely, and I identify as the Latin community not because of anything else, because I'm a true believer that we are citizens of the universe, and we're all one and alike, right? And going right back to what you're saying, I think along the way, we're all going to find our path of who we are and what we are and what our purpose is. But I feel a tremendous amount. I know that my parents would have wished that they had given me a completely different life that they could afford to give me, right? So I know, I know consciously they could only give me what they knew how to give me, okay? But I also feel like I have a responsibility, I know better, so I have to do better, right? So I have an opportunity today to be able to like yourself, deliver the message, right? Deliver the message. And I don't have to sell, I don't have to push, and I don't even want to convince. I just want people to realize that, as you said, there's old structures, there are old systems that are absolutely dysfunctional. And and I see exactly what you're saying, Gary. I called it the Great Awakening, right? And I see it so much in the younger generation. I think that for a lot of people our age, our generation, that have been through so much, it's hard for them to be able to process the changes that are happening in the world. So there's almost a gap, there's almost a bridge that needs to be, we need to close that gap between generations. So the older generations, the generations with experience and life, that they have experienced difficult times, are willing to listen, that there's new opportunities and there's new systems and new beliefs, and are able to embrace the younger generation, to ease up and say, yeah, this is okay to meditate. It's not woo-woo, it's not crazy. It's okay to to know that, you said it on the podcast. I truly believe that this multi-sensory process has been around forever. Okay, I think it is a process that has taken that is really coming alive today, because what has happened in the past has not worked, right? So by default, the universe is kind enough to teach us a lesson that we need to change, we need to evolve, we need to grow. That what we have done as human beings maybe served 100 years ago or 200 years ago, but not anymore. We need a kinder, softer approach to life, and I do believe that in my culture and in many cultures, okay, but I just happen to know my culture better because that's what I'm a byproduct of, right? So in my culture, I see this mainstream. I see my siblings. I'm one of 13 children, and I see my brothers and sisters, nephews and nieces that live the same way my parents lived 40, 50 years ago. And I know that what my parents did not work for them. Does that make sense?
It does. Yes, it does.
And I think that if we are able to somehow spread a message, in my experience, my awakening happened through personal development. Okay, a lot different than you. I think that you actually had a spiritual awakening. Okay, in my opinion, right? I mean, you talk, and I'd like for you to, if you don't mind, you said you were a very angry person. How does a very angry person that isolates other, that believes that this is the way I am, and so it be, how does he go to being such a kinder, softened, conscious human being?
In my case, it was incrementally and with a lot of work. It wasn't a spiritual awakening, but over time. And by the way, I think cultures are important. It's not that I don't. Obviously, why am I drawn to Mexican and Hispanic cultures in general? Why am I drawn to Aboriginal cultures? Why am I drawn to Hawaiian and Lakota? Why am I drawn to Tibetan? There's so many cultures and languages in the world. Why those? And I feel that cultures are very important wells, resources of richness and knowledge and depth. But now we're coming to a place where we can appreciate those things,
right?
But not be limited by them, not identify with them. They are where we come from. I'm white. My family was Jewish. I never identified with that. I never participated in it, but I can feel its influence on me. Not the teaching influence. I don't know much about Judaism, but there's something about that culture that is in me. But I also know that I am a personality that comes from a soul, and that my soul has myriad personalities. And each of those personalities has a lineage.
Wow.
Yes, when I saw that, I thought, wow. So that doesn't mean that I devalue in any way the personality that I am, the time that I am, who I am now. But I recognize I am a personality, I'm a soul, not only a personality. And my soul has been German, has been Mexican, has been Hawaiian, has been Lakota, has been involved in all of the wisdom and all of the brutality of all of those. And all of those cultures that are still alive, multisensory perception is a part of it. Every shaman knows how to visit the unseen world and bring wisdom and practical knowledge back to the seen world. Every billions of Buddhists and Hindus believe in reincarnation. They generally don't live as though it's so, even though, like billions of Christians believe in love, but they don't live that way, but they do believe it. Now, what is new is that the entire human species is becoming multisensory. not just the shamans, not just the wise ones, not just the prophets in our religious literature, but all of us, our granddaughters, you, the young people you're working with, are all over a few generations becoming multisensory. And that's the new evolutionary path. And that's what I want to contribute to. So if I know that what Linda and I can share will help the young people and our contemporaries in the Latin community, because I know they can help everyone who's being touched by the new consciousness. And by the way, those who aren't, we don't try to, we don't invite them to the school because they're not interested. And it's not that they're not interested because they're less intelligent, less sensitive, less educated. It's because they don't have anything in their experience that allows them to hook on to discussions of multisensory perception and new consciousness.
Wow.
They just don't. If they're good-hearted, they'll listen. If they're frightened, they'll judge it and dismiss it and create distance between the person who shares that. So we're not trying to convince those people. We're trying to support those people in whom multisensory perception is emerging. And there's a lot of them, hundreds of millions, probably more than that by now, many more.
Are they conscious of it, Gary?
Yes, sometimes, and sometimes they're conscious of something different. For example, the first time I ever heard the words personality and soul, something moved in me. And it wasn't, oh my God, my life has just changed. Not that at all. Just
right.
I felt it, and it was a curious feeling. And it was a decade later that it became everything that I do. So some people, the new consciousness comes into being like a supernova. And for other people, it's like a dawn in the morning slowly.
Wow.
The light's slowly emerging, but it's there. It's there, and we want to support everyone in their path. We don't say, by the way, we start every event, every workshop with this kind of suggestion. We suggest that you not take anything that we say as so simply because we say it. Instead, if you resonate with anything we say, experiment with it and see what that creates in your life. And if it creates something good, experiment some more. And if it doesn't, let it go. Don't try to wear a shoe that pinches. And we say, and in addition, we suggest you do that with everyone. Don't take anything that anyone says is so just because they've been on television or they've written a book or they're wealthy or they have a political position or they have a pulpit in a congregation. What do you resonate with in that, if anything? And if anything, experiment with it. So that's the approach we take, because the last thing we want to do is create any kind of dogma. The world has enough religious dogma. It's not what we're after. We are after people gaining. And by the way, working hard and creating authentic power. Working hard because it takes courage. It takes commitment and courage and compassion and conscious creation, conscious communication and action. We even have authentic power guidelines. They're on our website. Everyone can download them. And we're creating a 4-part course because each of those guidelines, commitment, courage, compassion, conscious communication and action, has actual guidelines in them. And these are the things we want to share and give. And you can give them if you think they're valuable.
I think they're incredibly valuable. And I'm sorry for interrupting you, because I want to share a couple of things with you, Gary. One of them is the obvious question is, how can I support you? And I want you to think about that for a second. And then secondly, the other question is, I completely relate to everything that you're saying. I believe that we are kindred spirits, right? That there's a connection that binds us. Okay. And when I read your book, when I interviewed you the first time, and you used the term multisensory, it was like for me, it was like, wow, I know what that is. I feel it.
That's
I am not crazy. Okay. This is happening to me. Okay. I'm going to call it, for lack of a better word, this is what somebody would call perhaps maybe an out of body experience, right? Something different, something people that, something's happening in you. Okay. Or something's happening through you. But there's a lot of people around you that don't understand what that change and transformation is. Okay. And you just explained it so eloquently. Okay. And I wish that we could have you on for about 5 minutes and explain it the way that you did, because I do believe that we have what is called the Great Awakening, that moment, that pause. I think it became more obvious and more prevalent during COVID, right? Because we were, for the first time, the world was paralyzed. It came to a standstill, and we were able to realize that we had been so busy in our lives that we had not had an opportunity to feel, to see, okay, to sense what's really out there, right? So for the very first time, we are able to feel and to sense and realize that life is more about hearing, seeing, touching, feeling, smelling, tasting, right? There is intuition. There is an energy. There is something out there. I don't know what to call it other than multisensory, quoting you, right? I know that. I feel that. Okay. And I think it's such a powerful, powerful message, because the beginning of change and transformation, in my opinion, and it was for me, it was to accept the fact that my old belief system no longer served me. And that I had to open myself to new ideas. Okay? If you and I would have had this conversation 20 years ago, we wouldn't have. Because I would have thought you were crazy.
And I didn't have it to give.
Right. And you would have thought I was an idiot. You get what I'm saying? I mean, it's just so the universe has a magical a magical way of transforming us as we need to be transformed. But there's also part of us, in my opinion, Gary, that needs to continue to do the work in order to fully understand what that transformation is, and embrace it, and then live it, and then practice it, and then pass it on.
Practice it. That's living it and practicing it. That's where the work comes in. That's why Linda and I give events and Facebook Lives, so we can really interact, so that people can get a glimpse of what it's really like. So I just, that experience you had of hearing the word multisensory, or that's how many people realize that that was real, that experience I just had.
Right.
It was real, and it's good.
Right.
And they can probably go to a therapist, and a therapist will say that's bad, but they know it's good. They know something happened. They know that they're... So anyway, we're talking about the same thing. And actually, I did have some of this to give 30 years ago, but if we talk 35 years ago, I had no clue. I've always been multisensory without recognizing it. When I was 18, or somewhere along that age, my grandmother died. My favorite. I think I was her favorite too. And I went home, and the rabbi was giving we were at her service, and the rabbi was giving a eulogy or talking about her. He was speaking to an audience that was in front of him, and the family was in an alcove to his right, and above the arch in the alcove was a closed-circuit television set. In those days, closed-circuit TV was so novel. It was so novel. it made me laugh. And my grandmother jerked my hand down and she said, shh. She didn't want me disrupting her funeral. She wanted to enjoy it. She wanted to hear what people had to say. Well, I never told my parents about that because they'd obviously think that I was consumed by grief and hallucinating. But I wasn't. There wasn't anything to hallucinate or be grieving about. That is, Grandma Libby just jerked my hand down and told me to be quiet. And not only that, I knew her. I knew how she did it. When I would visit her, she lived in this large building. It had a big restaurant in it, and it was like a retirement home. It wasn't a retirement home. It was honestly an apartment building, but that's the way it turned out. And we would have dinner, and then afterwards she'd walk me through the lobby holding hands, and it'd be a sea of gray hair, and she'd say, now, oh, Gary, you remember Mrs. Goldsmith? And I'd say, mm-hmm. Hi. And she'd say, oh, you remember Herman? I'd say, mm-hmm. And if I ever didn't say, mm-hmm, she'd jerk my hand down. She'd say, shh. And that's what she did at her funeral.
Wow.
So I didn't know that was multisensory when it happened. I just know Grandma did it. Now, years later, I was living in San Francisco. My life was motorcycles, women, sex with women specifically, drugs. And I got invited to a meeting of physicists at the Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory. And I went because I was curious what physicists look like. And it so impressed me, Peter. They were talking about, it was a small group, 8 or 10 physicists, but world-renowned, some of them. And, well, here's a short, I'll make it a little shorter. They were discussing among themselves, are we creating the reality we're experimenting with? That's exactly the question I was asking my arrogant cohort of intellectuals in North Beach coffee shops, except these were real physicists. And I came back so excited. I felt like I'd had 3 cups of cappuccino and sparks were coming off my fingertips, but I couldn't explain any of this. I could not articulate why I was so excited. I went back, I asked if I could come back, and they said I could. I did. Started to go to the used bookstores in Berkeley, because I had very little money then. I was on food stamps, living on food stamps, but the books would they would attract me. They would say, come here. Yeah. And I would start getting books and taking them home, and I began to understand some of the things that were exciting me. And then I was at this gathering at Esalen, which is a New Age center in California, and I was sitting at a table with David Finkelstein, who was the chairman of the physics, who was a physicist from Yeshiva University in New York, and then became the head of the department at Georgia Institute of Technology. And we were talking physics, a little bit of physics, and Al Wong, who's a Chinese Tai Chi master, and he said, when I was in Taiwan, I studied physics at National Taiwan University. We called it Wu Li. And I said, well, what does Wu Li mean? And he said, it means patterns of organic energy. Oh, that went right into me. Wow. Physics, patterns of energy, I understand. Organic, what understanding is there here that I'm ignorant of? So we started to talk, and he said, well, Chinese is a tonal language, and he explained what that means. So you can say the same thing like wu, 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 wu. There are 4 tones in Mandarin, and each of them means something different, and they're all written differently. So Wu Li, that's 2 characters. Right. But you can say Wu Li with these different permutations, and they mean different things completely. And then he started to go into what they mean. He said one of them means nonsense. Another means my way. Another means enlightenment. And so on these napkins, paper napkins there at Esalen, he was writing these characters, these sets of characters. And I said, that's it. I'm going to write a book. I'm going to write a book. And this is the structure. And I'm going to write it to share what I'm learning, because I'm not going to be involved in physics indefinitely. And I want to give what I'm learning on a silver platter to liberal arts majors like me that don't like science, don't like mathematics. And I did. And the book was called The Dancing Woolly Masters, an overview of the new physics. And there's a lot of things happened because of that book and what led up to it. First of all, when I started writing the book, and here's part of my long answer to your question, how did I transform? How did that happen? I started looking at each of those chapters in each section, and I write an outline, how I thought it should fit together. And as soon as I started to write, the outlines seemed so yesterday to me, and the energy was going someplace else. And I would always go with the energy. That's where the buzz, the excitement, the juice, the electricity was. And I would write that. And then I'd write, and eventually it would come to an end. The chapter would end. That's always been an amazing experience to me, when a chapter ends, how I know it. That's the end. Sometimes I don't, and I write past it, and I realize, oh, this is falling apart now because I passed the end of the chapter. Right. So anyway, I was having these kind of experiences. But the real experience was, after 6 months, I had 6 chapters, and they fit together, really fit together. And I thought, how did that happen? Because I threw the outlines away, and I wrote extemporaneously, so to speak, intuitively, impulsively almost, but intelligently, because I'd done a lot of research before I started writing. And that's when I realized I'm not alone in writing this chapter. And I realized nobody's ever alone.
Wow.
And it's impossible to create alone, because no one is alone. And that was my first real experience of non-physical reality, the reality of non-physical reality. And I had a friend that was frightened of that. She was a Jungian therapist. She said, Gary, be careful. You don't know what you're getting into. I knew what I was getting into, and I wanted more of it. I decided that I was going to live my life the way this book was being written, spontaneously, intelligently, joyfully. And I've moved along that road a little bit. But that was, to me, one of the 2 biggest ironies in my life, that I should discover non-physical reality writing a book about quantum physics. And,
wow.
and the other thing that I said, the second thing, the one I mentioned earlier that was so big to me about that book was my first gift to life. I was in my mid-30s as I was writing that. Before that, everything was for me. For me. The sex. I wanted money. I wanted fame. I didn't have any. I didn't have either. I was resentful that I didn't have either. I was just, everything I did it was all for me. This book, The Dancing Woolly Masters, there was no strings attached to it. I didn't even think about it. It was a gift, and it was a good gift. Wow. And my very first gift to life. And that was, who can say when a story begins, but that was one beginning point on a journey that I was on that led me to where I am in this lifetime.
What an incredible story, Gary. And you said something, I was resentful for the things that I didn't have. And that was obviously the manifestation of your anger. That was a manifestation of your quest to fill that empty soul through sex and motorcycles and drugs and everything else. And you shifted that into learning and into gift into the universe. What a powerful story, Gary. Thank you for sharing that.
I'm so glad you're saying that, because I've been thinking about writing a book. I can't write it now. I've got a podcast to do first and a lot of events to create with Linda, but I wanted to write a book about a few things about my life. It was because I've learned from other people so much. And then I think, well, other people can learn from my life the way I learned from theirs. And then a frightened part of my personality comes up and says, that's just, you just want recognition. You want to just, it's a trip. It's like an ego trip. What do you want to write a book about your life for? And so it helps me when I get a reflection and somebody says, wow, that's interesting.
No, Gary. I think ego can be good at times. I think ego can be a service. We have to be able to have the self-confidence to allow it to tap into our creativity. And if we dim our ego, if we completely shut it off, if we turn off the light, how can we give out to the world? How can we?
Yeah, I agree with you. I didn't want to use the word ego. It's a sort of a flabby word. It doesn't. I like to use more precise language. Frightened part of my personality. The parts that have all those characteristics that Freud might have called egotistical, anger, resentment, jealousy. So when a frightened part of my personality comes up, I have to challenge it. That's creating authentic power.
Absolutely. But that is also part of the duality of who we are, right? The good, yes. The bad, the ugly, the different.
I would say I've come to see things so differently. This is why we do what we do. Everything, the meaning is everything has changed. I don't think, in my experience, I don't experience the universe as thinking or looking in terms of good or bad, or better or worse, or success or failure. I think what I've seen is, if it looks at all, it looks in terms of cause and effect. If I participate in a cause, I participate in the effect. And that's the way the Earth School works. It's a magnificent learning arena. There's no preaching, there's no proselytizing, there's no reward, and there's no punishment. There is cause and effect, and every individual experiences the effects of what that individual causes. And the effects are choices of intention, love or fear. And intention is a quality of consciousness, and that quality of consciousness infuses the deed or the word. And if that quality of consciousness is love, it creates constructive, good-feeling consequences. And if that quality of consciousness is fear, it is painful to experience, and it creates painful consequences that are destructive. So that's the way I've come to look. It's not in terms of judgment, or I would say the universe is a universe of non-judgmental justice. That is, everything is appropriate. Everything experience is designed to bring the consciousness of the soul into the awareness of the personality. And those experiences are often personalities often experiences that the personality does not want. Cancer, divorce, failure of a business, death of a child. But every encounter with experience in the Earth School serves the spiritual development of the student in the Earth School. I see that now. I see it. And so are hundreds of millions of others. There's lots of ways to express this, but I love sharing these things because it brings people down to responsibility for what they create. Awareness and freedom. Awareness, emotional awareness, not emotional intelligence. I know Dan Goleman, who wrote that book. It's not being aware of your emotions and how to use it to climb a corporate ladder or make friends and influence people. It's becoming aware of your emotions because they give you information that's critical, vital to your spiritual development. And that information is, be alert. At this moment, a frightened part of your personality is active, or a loving part is active. And if you act when the frightened part is active, you're going to create consequences of this type, painful, destructive. And if you activate when a loving part is active, you'll create the opposite. That is the value of emotions. So emotional awareness is one of two tools in creating authentic power, and the other is
I'm sorry for interrupting you because I don't want to miss that point. I don't want to miss that point. How do we become aware? How do we become conscious? How do we feel that we don't go into that anger rage and we don't commit mistakes?
these. I wish I'd pressed record. Ask your permission to press record, and we can have a recording, and then we could use it.
We are recording because I want to use this as a podcast. You're recording.
Beautiful. Okay, let's do it, because this is what I love to share, Peter.
Yes.
And I love to share it with the people that it can benefit.
Yes.
So the other tool is a responsible choice, which is a choice that creates consequences for which you're willing to assume responsibility. So those two put together, plus intuition, you can consult your teachers now, are what's involved in creating authentic power. So I'm angry, or I'm craving sex, which means I want to utilize another person's body. That's not something that has been a part of my life for a long time, but I do not flippantly say I'm done with that. When a frightened part of my personality is just like someone who eats a lot or drinks a lot or needs sex a lot. When frightened parts of their personalities get strong enough, no, I don't do that now. I don't, because I don't want to go there. Not because it's wrong or it's bad or it creates consequences, but because I don't want to do it. I really don't want to do it. I want to give. I don't want to take anymore. So this is where creating authentic power will lead you. I have frightened parts of my personality. Linda and I get in power struggles. I get angry. I get judgment. I don't. The frightened parts of my personality do. And it's my responsibility to be aware of those. That's where emotional awareness comes in.
That's very interesting. So it's not you, it's the frightened parts of your personality. It's not Gary that gets scared. It's not Gary that gets angry. It's the frightened parts of Gary that gets angry. And that's an incredible distinction.
It is. However, if I act on that frightened part, Gary, I am the one that encounters the consequences.
Right.
Okay.
How do we become consciously aware? I call this, in recovery, there's HALT, right? Hungry, angry, lonely, tired, HALT, right? Those are kind of like the triggers that may cause somebody to act upon their desires.
Those are frightened parts, aren't they? Frightened parts of a personality.
Right.
The hunger itself activates fear. I've decided, I know that everyone has this choice, and I recognize it, and everyone does eventually, that there's two ways to learn wisdom, through love and trust or through fear and doubt. I spent most of my life learning the obvious way for us, fear and doubt. I fear that it's going to happen. I doubt that it's going to get any better. In fact, I'm preparing for the worst all the time. Love and trust is the opposite. It really means trust, but not trust that things will turn out the way I want them to. I, Gary Zukav, trust that what will happen serves a purpose. Not that there's destiny. We're not burdened with a destiny, but that everything that happens to each individual is appropriate for that individual, given the wisdom of the choices that he or she has made. I know that now.
Wow.
And so I do my best to live it and to model it.
Gary, I got to ask you a question. You said something, if I have a desire to have sex with someone or alcohol or whatever, is that the desire to use that person, or that the desire to feed something that is lacking within us? What is it?
It's a need not to feel pain.
It's a need not to feel pain.
It's wanting to escape the pain. That's where the alcohol comes in, the sex, the overeating, the shopping, the gambling, and all the compulsions perfectionism, workaholism, and all the obsessions, thoughts you can't stop thinking. That's where we have as humans one common experience among some other important ones, but we all share this. It is the pain of powerlessness. The pain of powerlessness is the pain of wanting to belong and not belonging.
Wow.
It's the pain of wanting to be loved and knowing that we're unlovable. It's the pain of wanting to love and knowing that I'm not capable of loving. It's knowing that you are inherently defective, intrinsically flawed, that you can't let anyone ever see yourself the way you see yourself because they wouldn't want anything to do with you. It's too ugly.
Wow.
And it's excruciating.
Wow.
That's the pain of powerlessness. 5 sensory humans have it, and multisensory humans have it. 5 sensory humans reach outward to mask the pain of powerlessness. They try to they try to change the external world. That's the pursuit of external power, manipulate and control. That manipulation and control, that is what is now toxic. It's poison. Used to be our good medicine. It enabled us to survive. Now it prevents our evolution. And perhaps
I love what you said there, right there, because I often, me being 22 years sober, 22 years of recovery, I've always talk about the fact of my character defects and my shortcomings. Okay. And
say that again.
My character defects and my shortcomings.
Character defects and shortcomings.
At some point, there were my defense mechanism. There were my survival skills. That's what I was alluding to early on in my conversation. But when I got to a certain place in society, when I got to a certain place in life, it's not sustainable.
Yeah. Multisensory perception changes even those perceptions, like character defects and shortcomings. From a multisensory perspective, the frightened parts of your personality are not defects. They are your avenues to your spiritual growth. They bring your attention to parts of your personality that you need to experience fully and move beyond the control of in order to give the gifts you were born to give. And to say that they're shortcomings is a judgment. It's a judgment of another frightened part of your personality that judges you, that judges what you're doing. There's no compassion there. There's no compassion for you, and therefore there's no compassion for other people. All of these things are the new consciousness. And I love sharing them. And I love sharing them with you, Peter, because you're talking about things that I have, some of which I've experienced in my life, sexual addiction and anger, but also because this is why we're born, is to give love to the world.
Absolutely.
But you can hear that from any good-hearted preacher. But how? How do you do it when you want to kill somebody? How do you do it when you want to kill yourself? How do you do it when you can't stop being jealous? How do you do it when a frightened part of your personality is active? This is how. Create authentic power. Develop emotional awareness and use it. Become aware of when fear is active in you. Then Practice your responsible choice. Make a choice for which you are willing to, that will create consequences for which you are willing to assume responsibility. You become the authority in your own life as you create authentic power. That's what it is. You develop mastery by whatever name it's called.
Wow. That was powerful, Gary. Gary, tell us about your teachings. Tell us about, and I know you don't call them teachings, you say sharings, right? How you and Linda, how do we become part of what you're doing? How do we become part of the multisensory, lack of a better word, help me fill in the blank, Gary. How do we become part of what you're doing? How do we become awake? How do we become part of a better universe?
You are already part of a universe that can't get better and it can't get worse. It's a universe of consciousness, of life, of love. What's changing is not the universe, but our awareness. And our awareness is expanding a little bit. If you think about a continuum, a concept from physics, a continuum, you might look at it as a horizontal line, but it's got no end to the right and it's got no end to the left. It goes indefinitely. Our five sensory perception is this much awareness of that continuum. Our multisensory perception is this much.
Wow.
But it's a big change. And we are on the way to becoming the continuum. That's the step beyond universal human.
How do we work with you and Linda? How do we become part of this and learn more about the work that you're doing?
Well, come to one of our events. I of course, read a book. That's really important.
Right.
Read a book. But come to an event. I can say that now because the events are now online.
Perfect.
People anywhere, if they can speak English, can go to them. And the cost of a weekend event now is less than a good pair of noise-canceling headphones. Now, people in the economically developing world will work for more than a year before they can buy a pair of noise-canceling earphones. For them, they're scholarships. We want to adjust. We want to support people. Our purpose is focused, and that is the focus. So I would say, if you can, come to an event. We decided we're in a new experiment for ourselves now. Linda and I took a 5-day annual retreat called Journey to the Soul. And we decided we're going to offer it in 4 separate weekend courses a year: spring, summer, fall, and winter. And one's on multisensory perception and intuition. We just gave that one for the first time, 3 days, 2.5. And the next one in April is going to be, well, I don't want to date our talk, but the next one will be, in whatever the sequence is, emotional awareness. The next one will be responsible choice. The next one will be spiritual partnership. Come to those, because there's a lot of support in between, and we've made it very easy. People can either take these events a la carte, one at a time, as they choose, in whatever order they choose. Or they can choose to be part of a program that includes all 4 of these, plus a lot of genuine, in-depth support between events, calls, meetings, online meetings, courses, events. And the cost of that is almost identical to the cost of buying 4 courses individually. We want to make it that attractive for people to do. And if they're not living in a developed, economically developed country, want to make it possible for them to do it too. So I'm mentioning this because this is part of the new universal human global ecosystem. We have just given the first of these events. And by the way, you can still join but you might have to wait until the sequence starts again. And the only requirement is that you attend 3 out of 4 of these events. But they're the most powerful, and by that I mean supportive event that Linda and I have given, and we've given a lot over 30 years. And so you can do that. It's not a matter of joining us in what we're doing. It's a matter of waking up in your world. You're already doing that. That is multisensory perception. But then it's a matter of recognizing it, appreciating it, beginning to utilize it, and experimenting with it, which means experimenting with your life.
Wow.
And that's what you have your life for. And that the way to really experiment with your life is to create authentic power. Become emotionally aware in terms of your body in a fail-safe way that you'll know what you're feeling. Practice responsible choice. Consult your intuition. Understand what that is and how you can do that. So it's not joining us. It's joining the world. It's joining the universe. You know, the Lakota have this wisdom, as all Aboriginal people do. The center of the universe is everywhere.
Wow, wow, wow. What an incredible episode. Gary, thank you so much. All the contact information is going to be available in the show notes. We look forward to you and Linda joining us at Excelente and supporting this incredible movement that is going to empower millions of people across the world. But more importantly, you continue to empower humans each and every day. And I thank you so much for the work that you do, the work that Linda does, the incredible opportunities that you are providing for people to even having a scholarship for the courses. Thank you, Gary. Thank you for joining us again today.
You're welcome, Peter. It's a joy to co-create with you.
Thank you so much.